Welcome everyone. The evolution of modern day visual effects, from the Lord of the Rings trilogy to the Mandalorian. My name is Dan Smiczek. I'm a visual effects supervisor, but also a virtual production supervisor the past few years. I actually work at Amazon MGM Studios. We have a very large LED volume in Culver City, California, and I supervise all the projects going through there. And on the frame here, you can kind of see some of the projects I worked on, and why we're talking about Lord of the Rings trilogy is because I actually worked on it. I was an animator on The Two Towers, and I also worked on the first season of the Mandalorian TV show. So we're going to kind of cover a lot of ground, and I'm going to weave in all the different types of projects I worked into these topics as much as I can. But I've worked on a lot of different movies, so I'm not going to be able to talk about everything I've worked on, but I'll try and fit it in, and also going to hit a lot of movies that I didn't work on, but it's important to talk about the technologies that were developed in those movies. So first of all, how do we define modern day visual effects? Like, what does that even mean? Well, I like to look at it split up in different ways. The first age of effects I see is kind of the rise of practical effects, which started in 1890, and I'm taking that age to about 1973, and you'll kind of see why there. So practical effects, we call it special effects. There's a lot of differences, but whenever we say special effects, we mean practical effects. And what those are illusions or visual tricks represent something real in film or TV. And the big thing with that is it's created on set at the time of filming. So while you're filming it, that's very important. Sometimes you'll see it called mechanical effects, special effects, SFX, optical effects. What is that? What type of things are that? Well, pyrotechnics, blowing things up, scale models, miniatures, animatronics, atmospheric, wind, rain, fog, snow. Again, all real things that the actors are experiencing. Multiple exposures, so back in the days of film, just exposing the film multiple times to try and capture different things at different times. Rear screen projection, used a lot in driving scenes way back when, Alfred Hitchcock or even James Bond films, and also stop motion animation, which takes us to the second age of effects. And that's the rise of digital effects, or as we call it, visual effects, or VFX. And I kind of put that into the 1973 to 2000. So that's kind of, when we started, imagery was created, manipulated, or enhanced post-production, so after filming. So things were done later, usually done with computers, integrated, actual footage and computer-generated manipulated imagery. That's visual effects. Types of examples, just to name a few: digital compositing, combining, like I mentioned, the real footage and computer-generated motion capture, computer animation, rotoscoping, how to cut somebody out of an image so you can add things behind them, in the more generic computer-generated imagery, CGI. So the very first digital visual effects, it was in 1973 on the movie Westworld. You can see there, it was how they made the vision for the robots in the movie, and that was the first film version of visual effects. And then soon after that, in 1976, Future World had the first 3D model of a hand. In 1984, we started getting into The Last Starfighter, extensive CGI vehicles and environments. And a big one for those of us in the visual effects industry was in 1985. It was the first fully rendered CG character in the Young Sherlock Holmes. From there, everything went into turbo. You got 1989, The Abyss. You got Terminator 2. Death Becomes Her was a very big milestone as well. Jurassic Park, of course. Apollo 13, Independence Day, Titanic, Starship Troopers, The Matrix. You can see during that time period, it was an explosion of amazing films that still hold up to this day. But the big defining characteristics of that was there are very few companies that were doing it globally, very few individuals. Proprietary hardware, the hardware people were making in their garage, proprietary software. It was all handwritten stuff, hand-created things. And it was a very high barrier for entry to do this type of work. So that was kind of the second age, which brings us to the third age, modern day as I called it now. And I see that as the democratization of digital effects. So that's about 2000 to present day. And I started in the industry about 2001, so it's definitely seen through the lens of my career, so we'll go in it. So what are the defining characteristics of this third age? Well, it's a transition from a dozen visual effects companies globally to hundreds of them. You can see here, we're even here today, all the people that are learning how to do visual effects. It was a transition from, like I mentioned, the high-cost custom hardware SGI workstations running Unix, very hard to maintain, very expensive, to now more low-cost, off-the-shelf hardware, computers you can buy at the store, running Linux, running Windows, running Mac, all of the different types of software. Speaking of, transition from proprietary or costly software, Wavefront, Prisms, Rhythm Use had a program called Voodoo, Xeno, to off-the-shelf solutions now, Maya, Softimage, 3D Studio, Houdini, Shake, so many different types of programs you can just go to the store and buy now, or you can download online. And we transitioned into completely digital workflows. So taking film completely out of the picture, all this adds up to a much lower barrier to entry. So a democratization of everything. And we're going to kind of talk about some of these different technologies. So there's a lot that can be talked about for this time period, but I'm going to just focus on a few. 2005, The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. That was a huge technical leap in only 4 years. We went from, very few pieces of hair, different types of hair, to Aslan had about 6 million different types, or 6 million hairs in total. You can see how realistic he became, and it really became a central figure to the whole film. And also the development of the muscle system, you get much more defined muscles, whereas in the first generation it was more just kind of general shape of the skin, but you're actually seeing muscles starting to move under the surface of the skin. For a character like this, it's very important. Now we're going to jump a lot further ahead, 2017, where Wedded Digital, this is something they put together for the Academy, talking about their digital tissue system, which they use extensively for all their amazing projects, Avatar, all the Planet of the Apes movies. They've really been blasting their way ahead, and it's just truly extraordinary to see the muscles moving under the surface of the skin, all the hair simulations, everything kind of coming together and culminating into recently, a good example recently is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, where, Rocket Raccoon, not only is he, one character, but it was his entire life. So from when he was very small to very big, and Framestore did a fantastic job. And what the thing about this is, like, these characters they become very beloved. The emotions, the acting, you forget that they're real, are not real. So you're seeing, all these emotions come through with the technology, and that's what's so important for this. So, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. So that was a really big year for performance capture and the beginning of it. And the thing is, Andy Serkis really only provided body motion capture for the technology end of it. It was all just visual capture, just recorded video of him that the animators had to work with. There was no dots. It was before the dots on the face. So there was no way to really capture his emotions and expressions. And you're wondering, well, how is it so successful? And in this case, it was artist-driven. So the artists who designed the blend shapes, usually if you do facial animation, you've got handfuls of blend shapes. But an artist went in there and made hundreds using Andy Serkis's face, going through different emotions, giving them a full palette so you can see that you can hit those exact types of poses that Andy was making. So even though Andy did provide these performances, it was animators that were driving it and matching these things. And also hands, the hand capture was hit and miss. A lot of times it was the animators who actually were animating that. And the reason I have that there is in the corner there, Gollum with the rope around his neck. That was my contribution, Gollum. I did all the rope simulations when he gets dragged around by Frodo. So I did some fantastic rope animation on that one. So, but it was just a great example of just so many different people coming together and having the actor's performance really come through in that character. But that was kind of the beginning of what I would call performance capture. Now let's move ahead. Avatar. It is really set the bar. And that was a case we're now actually recording very close cameras, digital dots on face, but just the sheer amount of capture that was done for this film was only surpassed by their new film, the new Avatar. But you can see just the level of just the capture of the performances of the actors. That's what's really key and important to this stuff, is that you really want that to shine through the technology and to really capture and be like, hey, that's Sigourney Weaver. That's actually, I can see the performance of Sigourney Weaver coming out in that. And that's what you got to really take into account with all this talk of technologies. It always goes back to the performances, always goes back to the artistic hands that are involved in this. So now I want to talk about today, back to the idea of democratization. So now you have MetaHuman Animator in the Unreal Engine. So at home, you're using your phone, you're creating a likeness of yourself, you're recording your facial animation, you're putting it on characters in real time. That's amazing. In 20 years, you can now do what Andy Serkis was doing on set and a whole team of people, and it's just you that can do that. There's also Move AI, a real-time markerless mocap system that's starting to become more and more. So that's just setting up a few cameras and you walking around your room, and it's capturing your motion capture. No white balls that are going to fall off, no anything like that. It's just you and your movements. So you can see, like, you can go home today and be creating visual effects, and that's what has made this such an accessible time. Now, crowds. This is a little bit of a special area for me, and I'll show you why. So crowds in visual effects, back in the prequel trilogy for Star Wars, you have like Q-tips for scenes of the pod racers, physical Q-tips as the crowd. It was amazing. But now we're starting to get into, well, what's the digital solution to that? And that's where Lord of the Rings Two Towers came in, and the creation of Massive. So the software is called Massive. And Stephen Regelis, he worked with Peter Jackson to create this software, and it was really revolutionary. Like, you were, thousands and thousands of characters interacting with each other. It's a fuzzy logic-based system, so they're all thinking in their own way. So they all know their surroundings, how to walk up a hill, how to fight somebody, how to run away from somebody. And it was truly a giant leap in technology. And it was really impressive and jaw-dropping to see for the first time. So when I was at Weta for the Two Towers, in the animation department, one of my jobs was adding violence to shots. So that would be adding a lot of mid-ground fight scenes, and then behind that would be Massive. So I got to kind of see these things come together. One of the big shots I did in Lord of the Rings was the Ents marching on Isengard. So I was doing 10 different walk cycles of tree people walking down a hill, but then behind it was hundreds of massive characters. And that's kind of where I started to lean into my specialty, which has become basically taking technology, learning it, and how to implement it into different workflows. So I became the Massive supervisor for the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. So it was my job to learn that technology and bring it out of Weta. So Stephen, who created Massive, made a great deal with Peter Jackson, and he said, okay, I'm going to make this software for you, but I want to be able to sell it to other people. And Peter's like, sure, as long as we have a license for life, you can take this software and sell it to whoever you want or whoever would work. He wanted to push the technology further. So I was fortunate that I was able to train with Stephen, bring Massive out of Weta for the first time for the first Chronicles of Narnia movie. And the scale of this was not small. We did 6 months of motion capture. We motion captured horses. We had 50 different massive agents. You can see just the sheer variety of different characters. We had flying agents. We had hawks. We had centaurs. So that was an interesting case of combining the motion capture of horses with actual physical people as well. So 2 different sets of motion capture and how to get that to work together. So it was a huge endeavor, many years in the making, but it turned out fantastic. And it kind of showed how to bring Massive into a different pipeline. Rhythm and Hughes, they kind of pride themselves on their custom software at the time. So I was able to work with them to leverage the important parts of Massive to work inside Rhythm and Hughes' pipeline. So we were getting all the animation and a lot of the information that's driven by Massive, but then was able to put it into Rhythm and Hughes' renderer. And they created a truly amazing system to be able to have different levels of detail that you could instantly go between. We simulated thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of characters. In the movie, it turned into a lot of people running and a few clashes, but we had it all ready so they could fight as much as they possibly could. And this just kind of gives you an idea of kind of how it was broken up. Anything red there is a hero animation, and then everything behind it is all in Massive. You can just see the sheer different types of characters and banners and arrows and just all the different types of things that we were able to push through there. And one of the big things about Massive is, I mentioned fuzzy logic, but it's a combination of fuzzy logic and procedural animation. It's not necessarily new ideas, but it was a new implementation of them. So this kind of shows the power of Massive. So let's move more into effects simulation, which is another big area that I spent a lot of time in. I worked on the film Elf, Christmas classic. At the time, had no idea it was going to be any good. I don't know if it's big here. It's big, and my kids watch it. I'm very proud of the fact I worked on it. And at the time, we had no idea it was going to be any good. We thought it was going to be terrible from everything we saw. But in the end, it turned out fantastic. But this was an example of effect simulation. So this Rhythm Hughes was building their volumetric renderer, so the thing that would make smoke and things like that. So this was the very first use of their in-house volumetric renderer. Again, custom software. And you can see, you know, at the time, we thought it looked great, but it's pretty soft. There's not a lot of detail to it. But it was, you know, that first use of something in-house, custom created. So now we're going to get into kind of where I am these days, virtual production, specifically in-camera visual effects. There's many different types of virtual production. That's kind of a blanket term used for a lot of things, like Lion King. They did a lot of virtual production, but it was more, you know, camera capture of things. What I'm specifically going to be talking about is more similar to the roots, which is rear screen projection. So you're putting up images behind the actors on set live. And a great example of kind of the big shift on this was in 2013 with the film Oblivion. So their entire set where they spent a lot of the movie, it was like glass houses, reflective surfaces, and in this case it was still using projector-based solutions. So they went to mountaintops, captured these beautiful vistas, and then played them back through projectors. But it played a huge part in that film, and it would have been a very different film if it was a completely green screen stages. It's all getting added later, trying to remove green screen spill on everything, on the reflections. It would have been a huge nightmare, but they're capturing all of that live. So that kind of brings into The Mandalorian Season 1 and why that is such a big shift. So that was kind of the first creation of very large LED volumes. In this case, you know, it was a way to immerse a very reflective character. And we're using a marriage of a lot of different technologies. You got concert technology with LED volumes, you got motion capture technology to record the physical camera movements, and you have game engine technology. So that was a big thing adding into this. Unreal is one of the games in there. Engines, Mandalorian, they use a mix of different ones that they have an in-house solution, but also the Unreal game engine. And the big thing about that is you're getting proper parallax through the camera. So even though you're in a small LED volume, the computing power is doing it all, so it's almost like you're making a window into a whole different world. You can see some more images there. You can kind of see how that kind of creates a giant world. And as the camera moves, the game engine's correctly doing the math to have that perspective shift so it looks like a giant, giant room that you're in, or flying in a spaceship, or as simple as sitting in an office. So it was a really big change in things. And I was a CG supervisor on the first season of Mandalorian, and I was on the post side of it. And I remember we worked on several sequences that were shot in a volume, and we just couldn't quite understand what we were seeing. We're like, wait, this was done with a game engine? This is amazing. And we were doing work on top of what they were doing. And it definitely was a big career changer for me of like, oh, this is kind of more what I want to do. Going along with that, I've always been at the forefront of pushing technology and visual effects. So I started going down that front, which led me to Amazon. So, virtual production in-camera visual effects. It allows filmmakers to capture visual effects while you're filming instead of in post-production. Filmmakers see how digital imagery will interact live action filming in real time. You are seeing everything. It's a much more collaborative experience. You got the DP there, the director there. Everyone is seeing exactly what you're capturing. A lot of times, if you shoot a Marvel movie, it's all green screen environments. It's 6 months later that you're actually creating those digital worlds. The DP is on another project. He's checked out. He's not going to be involved anymore. So this can be a much more collaborative experience on set. It's also a much more immersive experience for the actors, as you can imagine. You don't have to look at a white tennis ball running around the room. You're actually seeing a monster on the screen that you're reacting to, or flying a spaceship through the tunnels or things like that. And what's interesting is we're combining practical mechanical hardware and effects with digitally created visual effects. So I'm going to throw out there, in-camera VFX or virtual production is special effects plus visual effects. It's the combination of those two things, which is why it's kind of taken a lot of projects by storm. I could definitely go on about that one forever, but I want to kind of move on to one more technology evolution, artificial intelligence. It's a big buzzword right now. What is AI? Well, it's kind of a blanket term. It covers a lot of different things. Machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, generative AI, which is a hot topic, and the big one, content generation. So everyone really took notice when OpenAI started showing off Sora. You know, anybody at home type up a prompt, you're getting incredibly high resolution, high fidelity images. Right now, you know, it's harder to control. People question, like, where's the source material coming from? There's a lot of different questions, but there's no holding it back. We all need to accept that this is happening, and we need to figure out how we can use it, how to work it into our workflows, and where, you know, things are going to go with it. And this is just kind of the beginning of AI. There's like so many other areas that I didn't even talk about. We talked earlier about storyboarding and, you know, visualization things of just, you know, making some tear images, just some ideas in your head. But I want to kind of bring it back to this page with my picture there. Yeah, that's not me. That was AI generated. And this, I didn't have a very good photo with me with a beard, so I wanted to create something that was more like me. So I just took some photos and used Portrait Pal and made another headshot. So you can just kind of see the different ways AI is kind of seeping into everything. And I'm going to bring it back here, talk about the third age of the modern day from 2000 to present day. Or is it 2025? Are we almost at the end of the third age? And I'm going to leave you this question. Will the latest advancements in AI be the beginning of the fourth age of effects? Well, we'll see. Thank you, everybody.